Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining our breakout session, which is going to be the most positive of the day. And by the end of it, we're going to have got the North moving. That's all we're going to achieve in the next hour, isn't it? My name's Nancy Fielder. I'm editor-in-chief across the City World's titles, which was JPI Media, which was Johnston Press, which you've probably heard of because we've got lots of newspapers in Edinburgh, Sheffield, Leeds, all over the place. But we have funny names in local newspapers because it's challenging times. But the most positive thing of the day, I got on a train this morning. It took me from Sheffield to Newcastle without a hitch. It was on time. And here we are. So I often start these things by having a moan, but I'm not. I'm going positive. So hopefully there'll be lots of positive questions. We've got a fantastic panel who will introduce themselves along the way. But we are going to start the positive tone with Nick Donovan from Northern. So please take the mic. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I think the instructions are just a 3 or 4 minute little introduction to get things underway from each of us, and then a good question and discussion session. So look, I think lots of friends in the room who travel with Northern regularly. Just a reminder, we're the second biggest train operating company in the UK. I always say we're the most complex one. We cover some of the greatest geography. I mean, in fact, little known fact is we employ a small number of people in London, would you believe, who look after LNER's service, technical riding inspectors in London. So our geography of employees is very great. About 2,500 trains a day. In the December 22 timetable, I like to remind people that we increased the number of vehicle miles that we're operating by about 15%. So we are running more capacity now than Northern ever has. So really important with our new train fleet and the refurbishment of the older fleet as well. I think the thing that Northern exists for is to help drive the economy of the North, and that's the message I always give to my team. We're about connecting people and places and communities and so on. A study that we ran about 3 years ago, our economic benefit is about £2.50 for every pound of taxpayer investment. And we're really conscious of that. And I always say to the team, remember, every pound is a taxpayer pound. Spend it wisely and spend it wisely on doing the job of connecting people and places. But every one of our routes is subsidised. And I have to remind this for people, and I do often talk about it now, actually, to the tune of 40 pence per passenger mile. It's a big a big subsidy figure. So you think about that 10-mile journey on average is taking £4 taxpayer subsidy. So it is so important that not only do we generate revenue, but we generate volume of people travelling, because that's the bit that really drives the economic benefit of what we do. So we've been pressing that very hard. You'll have seen our flash marketing campaign. I'm really pleased to say we talk internally about being in revenue growth at the moment. We're about 3% up on revenue from pre-COVID, but our volumes are still down by about 10%. And that's why we're doing the flash sales, the £3 Thursday sale that's on at the moment, and also pressing very, very hard on revenue protection. We've got our lowest level of fare evasion now than Northern has ever had. So the three messages really for me today, I think. Firstly, the first passenger pain point is around performance. And clearly we've got to get performance right. I'm actually quite pleased. We need to get better. I'm quite pleased that as I stand here today, the latest ORR's published figures are that we are absolutely square on the England and Wales average in terms of our cancellation rate. And that's the adjusted cancellation rate, taking into account all reasons of cancellations. And the one driver to us that we're really focused on is around sickness. Sickness is the thing that's holding us back in terms of getting that position better, and we are improving on that. That's in our control. And then more broadly is a point around the terms, conditions, working arrangements and so on for colleagues. And one of the things, if I could wave one magic wand in this space, it would be around working arrangements for colleagues. So largely we run a volunteer railway on a Sunday in Western Central. 95% of our colleagues have to volunteer to come to work. And that needs to change. And I say that to colleagues as well. So performance, absolutely for square and centre in my mind. We've now more drivers than we ever had. And actually, I was reminded by one of the industry journalists the other day. He said, "Nick, you always said it would take 15 to 18 months to get the COVID training backlog sorted out. We got that sorted out before the December 22 timetable change." The second thing I'd change is around ticketing, fares and ticketing. It's a nightmare. It is too complex and it stops people travelling by train without a shadow of a doubt. I have personally been caught out before I joined Northern by buying the wrong ticket. It is too easy to do. So lots to be done in that space. There is some stuff that we are doing now. So 77% of our tickets on a day about 4 weeks ago were digital tickets. Things are going digital. More than 50% of our season tickets are now digital. I didn't think I'd ever say that 3 years ago. And we're now out over 100,000 digital validations a day as part of our ticket validation process. The third thing I want to talk about, there's lots been talked about in this conference about infrastructure and so on. Rolling stock I won't talk about too much, other than there's an enormous decarbonisation agenda. We've got a rolling stock strategy that's sitting behind that. We've got an ageing fleet for a good bit of our fleet, and we have to tackle that in a network that's about 25% electrified. So there's a good deal of work there. And the last word I'm going to make actually is around all of this. We have to do stuff in the back office. We still have a fax machine in our control room. We still have a fax machine in our train crew depots. And that's not, I can't change that by taking the fax machines away. That is an indicative of some of the out-of-date processes that are embedded, that have stayed around the place for a good deal of time. And we're on with those now, but they cost time and money to deal with. And when we've dealt with them, that'll underpin that performance point and the robustness of delivery. That's all I wanted to say. Hopefully a few seeds of thought in there, and hopefully I haven't overrun my 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I feel like we may have one or two questions from the audience at the end of our panel. A few minutes. So next, I'm delighted to introduce Anna Jane Hunter from Phillips Associates.
Hi, everyone. It's lovely to see some familiar faces here in the North today. And it's been said already by some of the speakers I've listened to, but I'll say it again. And some of you have already heard me say it several times when I've spoken on other things. I am an unashamedly proud Northerner, and it's lovely to be speaking in Newcastle. I'm also an unashamedly proud member of the railway family. I'm third generation railway. I'm married to a railwayman. So my technical specialism is railway, but this is a conference about transport for the North. So I thought I'd talk a little bit in my opening remarks about broader matters than rail, but feel free to quiz me on rail matters in the Q&A. So I am from the North originally, and I'm one of those Northerners who quite a while ago, admittedly, felt the need to get out to get on. So I did feel the need to go south, and I had to travel south. That's how I felt I would progress in my career, in my studies. I'm not ashamed to say that, because I did it because I felt I had to, and I've done well in life as a result. But isn't that a little bit sad to feel that you need to do that? And wanted to just think a little bit about why that might be. Transport is something that you really miss when it's not there, and you feel it when it's taken away from you, but you don't always notice it when you have it good. So passing your driving test where I'm from was not just a rite of passage, as it is for many people at 17, doing it as close to your 17th birthday as you can. It was a necessity. You had to pass your driving test to have a life as a teenager. And I look at my stepchildren now in Liverpool, where I now live, which, by the way, is south if you're from where I'm from, rather than north if you're from other places. And they've got it so good. They don't realise how good they've got it. So they have a network of buses that are brilliant. They connect them to where they need to go. They're not that expensive. They have the Merseyrail network, which, if Steve Rotherham was the mayor on this panel, I'd tell him to his face that it's brilliant. And, it's not that expensive, and it goes where you need it to go. Could it be better? All those things, the buses, the rail network, the roads, of course they could. They could be better, but they're pretty blooming good compared to how I had it. And I think that's something to be proud of and to focus on if we can. We started with positive remarks already. There are some really great things about transport in the North, but we should aspire to be as good as the best. Maybe we'll compare ourselves to London and say, why haven't we got it as good as there? I wanted to also just focus on a recent trip and another positive, partly for Andy's benefit. I came back from New Zealand on Friday after a holiday. And I wanted to just reflect on how difficult we found it to travel there at times. So we often hear that that rail in particular is pretty tricky. Nick's just talked about fares and ticketing. Even in a really big city like Auckland, we found it shockingly hard to get from the international airport into the city. When I travel in from Manchester Airport into the city of Manchester, I find it really easy. I find it really well connected. I find it clear how I need to get there by train, by tram, by bus. There's multiple ways of doing it. We had to get a train, followed by a bus, followed by a train to get into to Auckland city centre. That's too difficult, and it was expensive. So other places have got it difficult too. And I say that not to say just because other places have got it bad, we shouldn't aspire to better. But I think sometimes it's worth just reflecting on some of the positives and saying that it's not all bad. The North has come on so much in the last 10 years, transport wise. We used to have a whole load of old trains banging about on the network that were desperately in need of upgrading. We've done a lot of that great work. We've still got further to go. Of course, we need things like the TransPennine Route upgrade, Northern Powerhouse Rail, HS2 for the North. Yes, please. We need all of it. We need buses that are even better than they are, that are greener than they are. And we need integrated ticketing to allow end-to-end journeys. And that last mile is so important. I'm a big fan of e-scooters, use them quite a lot. We need to make things like that easier to integrate into our journeys so that everybody can make choices about sustainable transport and not be forced to do what I had to do at 17, pass your driving test, invest in a car, and obviously pollute the atmosphere through doing so because you feel like you've got no choice. That's all I'm going to say because I think the value's in the Q&A, but I didn't want to do a cop-out and not say anything. So hopefully we can have some really challenging questions in a bit.
Journalists are naturally cynical, and I go on and on. Anybody from Sheffield about the 2p bus fare when I was a kid? I think 8p is awful, but it was 2p. But I did an event like this with school children last week, and I said, what's the best thing about where you live? An 11-year-old said transportation. Now, the teacher next to him nearly fell off the chair in surprise, but actually there are a lot of good things. We've got to stick up for those as well as demanding more. And so I'm delighted to introduce Darren Oldham from Transport for the North. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm the new boy at TFN, so I've been here 3 weeks. So why have I made this decision to come to this organisation? So 2 minutes about myself. I was born in Rotherham. I live in Home Firth, and I've worked my entire career across the north of England. I've done things around the world, but what I really want to do is I want to try and help make a change for the better for the people of the north. That's why I've taken this role, and that's what I'm hoping to achieve. I think that if we take the point about the 2p bus fare for a moment, as a person growing up in the coalfields of South Yorkshire, we didn't have a car, but I could use the bus. I could get on the bus. The 10-2 bus would take me to Barnsley, or the X69 would take me to Sheffield. By having that effective public transport system, and those bus numbers and those bus times are still there in my head, that allowed me to push on and to go to university and for me to be here today. And that wouldn't have happened without that effective public transport system. So, I absolutely live and breathe this. This is fundamental because we owe it to ourselves and to the citizens across the north to make the north as effective as it possibly can be. We live in a fabulous place, absolutely fabulous. I'm entirely proud to say that, I go to Rotherham on a Saturday afternoon to watch the football. I go walking on the hills around Home Firth. It's a great place in which we live. But we need to be more positive about it. We need to be more positive about the place. And we need to be more confident in ourselves, the region in which we live, and what it is that we're trying to achieve. We've done some great things at TFN before my time, but we're now on a journey where I think we're moving into a more mature organisation. We've just had our 2-year funding settlement, so that puts us in a much more positive place. And my remit that I've set myself, and hopefully Patrick won't disagree with this, is that I want to help the North become better across the region and to help truly make those changes so that people do have that absolute choice of modes to make in terms of where they go for travel. So I'll tell you a story. It's quite a sobering one. This, and it's from yesterday. I'd got my speech ready, and I decided to not say that. I say something else. What I've said so far, and then this next bit. My daughter, she started work 6 months ago in Leeds. Very proud of her. She's done great. She went to university, got her first graduate job. She can get the train from Huddersfield into Leeds, and that's what I did. Started in 1990. That's exactly what I did. But unfortunately, yesterday we spent the day going out trying to buy her a car, and that's because my daughter wants to do the right thing. She wants to get the train, but she said to me, the worst part of her week is that evening time on the platform at Leeds, trying to get that train back to come home. So she wants to do the right thing, but she also needs to do the right thing by herself. So we spent the day looking to buy a car. That's not really what I wanted at all. Her younger sister, she's 2 years behind her. I'm very hopeful that by the time that my youngest daughter is in that same place, she won't need to make that decision. And that, for me, is one of the key tests. So we need to be confident. We need to be confident as a region, we need to be confident as individuals, and we need to be positive about what the North's got to offer, not just to ourselves, but to the UK as a whole. In population terms, we're effectively the equivalent of London and Scotland put together. If we can make this work better for all of us, then that's better for the UK as a whole. So I will leave you with that thought. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the generational thing is absolutely fascinating. And I think if we can make it better rather than worse and just make it grow, that's what we're all after. Now, for me to get to see Andy Burnham in Manchester, we drive across the most beautiful road in the entire country, except we're like the two of the biggest cities in the country. And yet you have to take Snake Pass. If you've never done it, it's absolutely gorgeous, but it's what you would do sort of for a day trip. And that's the destination. And it closes before it even thinks about snowing. And it's quite hard. The Sheffield to Manchester airport train disappeared during lockdown, never came back. So, yeah, it's nice to share a stage with somebody. It would be very difficult to visit from Sheffield. So, my pleasure to introduce Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham.
Thank you. Afternoon, everybody. Anna Jane, you mentioned something about wishing Steve Rotherham was here, so you could say something to his face. Do you know what? I am so relieved he's not here, given yesterday's football results. He would have been unbearable. So, yeah, honestly, you know what I mean, don't you? So, how can public transport level up the north? I'm going to continue the theme, actually, that you've heard from all three of our speakers. All gave great speeches there, which was fantastic. Positivity. The answer to the question is we are already levelling up the north through good public transport, and perhaps that's something that I don't say enough, and maybe the other mayors need to say more as well, all of us. If you look at Metrolink, we have one of Europe's biggest and most successful light rail systems. It is a fantastic system. We're very proud of it. And it has levelled up parts of Greater Manchester where it goes. If you look, the studies that we've done on Metrolink show that it's had a beneficial impact on levels of employment, at least 20% uplift when Metrolink arrives. In the more deprived areas, 30%, and a beneficial impact on house prices. There's other ways you could measure it as well. So we already are levelling up the north through good public transport. But as everyone else has said, we could be so much more with more. And I'm quite proud to say that we are now on the cusp of the biggest change to public transport in the north of England in a generation. And that is the creation of an integrated London-style system, which we will call the B network. I've taken the decision to put buses under public control. We're buying back the infrastructure, the depots. We're electrifying those depots. 100 buses are on order this side of the Pennines at Alexander Dennis, electric buses that will come into service in Wigan and Bolton, or 50 of them later this year. This will be a massive change and actually will take us up to a whole new level as a city region. The full B network will be in place on the 5th of January 2025. and that means a daily cap over bus, bike, and hire bike and tram. It's going to be brilliant. Well, we hope it's going to be brilliant. We're working hard to make sure that it is. And what we want to do is create a template that Liverpool, Leeds, Newcastle, Sheffield, other, we want this to be something that can go right round the north. So that's really positive, and I think that is how public transport will level up the north, when people have a system that means you can move differently. At the moment in the north of England, people have to be loyal to one mode of transport, a car, as Darren was just saying, or if you're a bus passenger, you kind of have to stay on the bus because you can't have an integrated approach to payment if you get off a bus and go on a tram, because at the moment it doesn't really work like that. When you have a system that enables people to move across bus and tram and take as many journeys as you like in any given day with a daily cap, that's when the economics in the north of England, when it comes to transport, will shift in favour of public transport and away from the car, and that will make life better, in my view, in so many ways. And it's really in touching distance for us now in Greater Manchester, and it's really exciting. But to throw in then some calls about how we can make sure we get it right. I'm glad the Secretary of State's coming today. I'm working closely with him because we want the government to, well, they already have helped us. Patrick, now Chair of Transport for the North, but as Transport Secretary, gave us the power to retake control of the buses. We've used it, and we continue to work with the government to bring through the B network and make it as good as we can make it. However, I think there are a number of calls just to make clear so that we understand how we can fully unlock the potential. The first is the cost of public transport in the north of England. And I think we need to make this issue, the cost of daily transport, public transport in the north, a general election issue. So actually the calls I'm going to make here go to both of the main parties, all of the main political parties. Public transport is too expensive to use at the moment. It can be cheaper for people, for 3 or 4 people to get an Uber than it is to catch a bus. It can be cheaper to get a plane than it is to get a train. We've got to change that if we're going to go in the right direction as a country. And Nick mentioned subsidy. Well, you couldn't run a public transport system in a city like Greater Manchester without a subsidy if we're going to make it as affordable and convenient for people. Pretty much every other country in the world subsidises its cities when it comes to the public transport system. Outside of London, we've been trying to run a no subsidy model for decades, actually, under all governments, and that just can't work, and it can't continue. If you bring the cost of fares down, you get so many benefits for people. You help people into training, you help people into jobs, you help people get out and about, you improve their mental health and well-being, you raise the aspirations of young people. The societal benefits of low-cost public transport, I've not even mentioned the climate benefits, are huge, actually. The clean air benefits. And this is what we need. It's good that we've got a £2 cap on bus fares at the moment, but we need to see that principle made permanent, and also public transport made cheaper going forward. And that is cheaper across all of the modes, so that we make the economics work in favour of public transport rather than getting the car. The second call I would make is to allow Greater Manchester to complete the vision of the B network in the second half of this decade by allowing us to work with Nick and Northern and bring some of those rail lines into the B network. So if somebody taps in at Buxton or in Southport, they're in the B network cap, and that would make ticketing simpler, Nick, I think, in the way that you're saying, and that would give people in those places a real reason to leave the car at home and get on public transport. So that's a call that we've put to the current government as part of a trailblazer negotiation we're doing at the moment on a new devolution deal for Greater Manchester, and having an approach to fares and ticketing, but also that ability to shape services with Nick and his colleagues at Northern, we think is a key ask. London's got TfL overground. Well, we want TFGM overground or GM Rail, however you want to call it. And we hope that we can land that, because if we do, we can have a B network by the end of this decade that is bike, bus, tram, and train. And imagine how much of a game changer that would be for the north of England. I'll finish just on infrastructure, though, because we do have to make the infrastructure call as well if we're going to be as good as we can be as a north of England. And I think there's going to have to be real change here if we're going to get this right. You know, it's positive that Trans-Pennine route upgrade is proceeding at the moment, but it's proceeding without having solved the central Manchester issues on rail, the capacity issues that continue to disrupt rail reliability across the north, with trains getting stuck in Manchester. Somebody put it to me, you know, building Trans-Pennine route upgrade without sorting out central Manchester will be like a motorway ending in a car park. We've got to be really careful that we don't repeat the mistake of the Ordsall Cord here, where we do one bit and we forget to see what the other connecting bit is. So we've got to get better at infrastructure. And the final point I'll make is it touches on the economic review that Transport for the North have issued today. If we build the right railway for the north of England, this great place where we live, as Darren said, could be so much more in the 21st century than if we're given the sort of cut price second class option. If we got the best solution we could get, the northern economy would forever be greater. People's lives would be improved. And that's why we will continue to fight for HS2 and Northern Powerhouse Rail, but done in the right way, in our view, which is an underground station at Piccadilly, and then a line that goes up through Bradford to Leeds and on elsewhere. That is to build, in my view, the right railway for the north of England in the 21st century. If you look at our city centre stations, Oxford Road, Deansgate, Salford Central, Victoria and Piccadilly, when did they last see serious investment? Commonwealth Games for Piccadilly, maybe? I think Victoria's had a roof, but look at them. You've got a gleaming city around these stations, and the rail stations are actually dragging us down. They're like outliers in a modern city. You go to London, and practically every main station in London has had billions spent on it in the last decade or two. Why then are we having to plead to get the right station at Piccadilly? Why? If you build it underground, you protect land for economic development around. It would be the beating heart of a resurgent north of England if we get this right. And this is the bit that, again, all governments, all political parties need to address. The way we give out money for rail infrastructure is done on too narrow a test, the Green Book test. It doesn't look at the full societal benefits that come from building the right railway for the north of England in the 21st century. And I will continue to make that case with the other mayors. HS2 with the eastern and a western leg, Northern Powerhouse Rail, underground through Piccadilly, Bradford, Leeds and beyond. That is what we need. And we should continue to make the case for that together, because that is what will transform the north. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy. Is my mic working? Can you hear me? Yes, you can. Okay. So we'll just have a very brief discussion because I suspect the room is full of questions. But my first sort of point was, if we were having a discussion 5 years ago, I mean, I guess the infrastructure might not be any different, but actually how people travel is really different now. So has sort of COVID, home working, all the changes that have hit us with lockdown and sort of how we progress out of it, has that made the case for investment? And we're talking billions, aren't we? These are really sort of hard figures for your average person like me to get your head around, because it costs so much to make these big changes. Is the case stronger now for investment, or has it been weakened by everything that's happened during the last 3-4 years? Feel free to jump in, anybody who wants to.
I can start, if you like, from a perspective in terms of the markets at the moment. So I think everybody in the room will recognise that the leisure market is much stronger in rail now. There has been a shift to home working that's dampened the commuter market. I think the north is really interesting. So you look at the sort of white collar areas, and we've seen a suppression of commuter volumes. But across the north, there is a lot of so-called blue collar commutes. People who have to commute to work, and those have come back very well. I think the other thing about the shift that we've seen accelerated over the last couple of years is weekend travel. So the strongest growth has been seen at weekends. Saturdays now are busier than some weekdays on occasions in terms of, I think, probably across transport overall. And you'll see the numbers across all modes, but certainly in rail, that is the case on a Saturday.
Oh, we absolutely see that, Nick. On our trams as well. The weekends are often our best days on the trams. You know, we've had a record weekend ever on Metrolink. I think just before Christmas. So that demand is still there, and it will come back. I think if we sort out some of the issues with services. To answer your question, Nancy, I think TfN have answered it today. They're saying that with the right infrastructure, Darren, if I've got this right, the North of England economy could be bigger by £118 billion every year, GVA per annum. And I think that answers the question, doesn't it? But more broadly, what are the wider benefits of living here if you have a railway system that is of that quality, where you can move quickly across these great cities? And it already is the best place in the world to live. As I agree with you about that. But let's not be complacent. Let's make it even better. I honestly cannot accept second best at Piccadilly, and I'll say this to this government. I'll say it to the next government. We can't. Why should we? Why should we build sort of second best infrastructure, and in doing that, always limit the potential for economic growth and always sort of diminish people's quality of life here? We really can't. I don't think. We've got to hold out for the most ambitious version of infrastructure, and that means not just taking a sort of 5-year or even a 25-year view of what it would return to UK PLC. You've got to take the long view. We're still using the Victorian infrastructure, aren't we? And they didn't make all of those tests, did they, when they put that infrastructure in? I think we've got to follow that lead, go ambitious, and the North of England and the UK as a whole will benefit for decades to come if we get this infrastructure right.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think that I think you say there, Andy, I agree with that entirely. I think what we all need to remember, and in some ways it's kind of the wrong question, the level of investment that we need here across the North is it's absolutely massive, but it could be a complete game changer. This isn't about us pleading for wanting more. This is actually to make things better for ourselves, but for the wider UK. The opportunity that this brings can be transformational. Now, going back to the point about the change in travel demand, we have to remember that we've probably been through the biggest change in how we live and work that we've probably ever had, over the time period. We've done fabulously well to return to a new normal, but it's only 2 years ago that we're in the full depths of COVID. So we do need to recognise that things will change, and I'm absolutely convinced that the level of suppressed demand for all sorts of different travel, is still not fully understood. Ourselves and others, I'm sure, are doing lots of work on that. But we do need to recognise that it's been a seismic change for us. But that seismic change is one of opportunity. If we get this right with technology and how we think and work and live, then actually we can take a real positive from the pandemic in terms of how we live our lives in the future.
Get some questions in.
That's okay. I'm going to ask one more myself. So my son is not 17 now, but when he was 15, he did a trip to London, phoned me up, really excited. The thing he was most excited to communicate back to Mum was it was free for him to travel around. And his expectation wasn't that anywhere in this country is doing it free. And I feel like he wants a car now. Of course he does. He wants to be able to drive around easily. He doesn't want to sort of wait for buses that don't come. He doesn't want to get trains that don't come. How do we really sort of change that? He wouldn't know what a fax machine was. And yet the train coming, how do we change this? It's about them, really, isn't it?
I just told Nick, I want that fax machine from Northern for the Museum of Science and Industry when they...
I'll get it to you as soon as I can, Andy. It's my objective. Absolutely.
Comes out of your office. So to answer that point, one of the things I'm most proud of as mayor was giving a free bus pass to our 16 to 18-year-olds. And it's so vital to them. It's an absolute lifeline.
And yeah, they already had that free in London, don't they? But no, that has really raised aspirations in Greater Manchester. I think it's really important. So something I meant to say at the start, I'll just say now, is everybody aware of what's just come in or is about to come in Germany? A few nods, but that suggests a lot of people are not aware. They are bringing in a €49 monthly pass covering all regional railways, trams, buses in every city in Germany. So €49 a month, and you can access all regional and city regional transport. I mean, how much can people spend on public transport? It's so much more expensive here, isn't it? To get, if you just only live by public transport, it's expensive for young people. But if they had that, they would definitely use it. And it's an investment, in my view. I justify the R Pass in Greater Manchester, which is the free bus pass for kids, because it's an investment in our economy and our potential. And if you lift aspirations of people, you are expanding your economic potential, aren't you? And I think sometimes we look at the case for funding transport way too narrowly. We need to. A good public transport system that's affordable is the foundation of a productive, successful economy, isn't it? And I think Germany understands that. Other countries understand it. And we're just nowhere near that game at the moment. The economics of transport in this country weigh in favour of the car, as Darren was saying before, in favour of the plane and not the train. Really, we're going to have to get this seriously rethought. And that's why I said the cost of public transport needs to be a general election issue, because we're heading in the wrong direction at the moment. And we're going against some of our climate challenges, and we need to completely repivot around and make public transport much cheaper and much more affordable.
And culturally the norm as well, because I think there's something about young people wanting to use public transport as their first choice, and a generational shift of people who want to do that now, but we need to encourage that. So, people in London, it's the norm to get the tube late at night, to get the bus late at night. You get the night bus, that's just normal in central London, but that's not normal in other cities. It's seen as, can I get the bus? Can I get the train? Is the bus shelter safe? Is the railway station well lit? As a woman, as a young woman, am I safe? Things like that are all connected. So yes, the cost of public transport is really important, but also the things that we wrap around that service are so important to have people use it more. Because I suspect part of the reason Germany can do that is they make the case for this is for everyone. This public transport network is for everyone, not just for this group or that group of people. And I think that's, for me, one of the big things that's different, having lived in London and lived elsewhere in the UK. It's for everyone in London. You have city bankers and cleaners using the tube.
Presumably, RJ, the reason they justify it is they think a lot of people will
do it.
Buy it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you get a lower cost, but more people.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do with the buses in Greater Manchester, lower the cost, but more people using them. And it's a different way of thinking about public transport than we've had in this country for quite a long time.
Yeah. Well, it can level up lives rather than levelling up the north, isn't it? It's within cities. It can be completely transformational. I've stood up so I can see you all because I couldn't see many people there. Has anybody got a question? I thought there might be one or two. Let's start on the front row. Yes. Oh, have we got a roving mic? We have. Sorry, she's coming from the entire other end of the room. We'll try and get through as many as we can if you could keep your answers fairly short, because there's a lot of hands.
Right,
Thank you.
Right, thank you. I think it's... is it working? Okay, I can't hear. I think it's pretty obvious that we need long-term planning to deliver change. It's a question of the difficulty we got is we're trying to deliver long-term planning with short-term funding. I think that needs to be addressed at some point in the future there. And the way the funding comes down, the short term of it, is that you end up having to make do amend with what you've got. So we end up, particularly in the north, is we sort of end up with, you know what you want, you know what you've planned for, but you're not going to get it, and you're going to have a smaller amount, and then try to say do the best with what you've got, which we always do, but we always end up make do amend.
Short term, but that's more a statement. Has anybody got anything?
Well,
true.
I have a response to that. I mean, everything that you say there is absolutely correct. I think there's probably not a transport planning professional that wouldn't want, longer term certainty. I think I think the travelling public, that's what they want as well. You know, if you can create certainty, then that's a real win-win. So I think I doubt anyone in the room would disagree with that. You know, I did mention a few minutes ago, you know, we're delighted at TFN that we've got a 2-year settlement for ourselves. Having confidence that you've got, you know, 2, 5, 10, 15 years of funding there, and that we're not having to, and that organisations are not having to forever compete to get that funding, then that's a real positive. So I think that, yes, absolutely, I think it's a no-brainer.
Okay, next question. From behind. We'll try and move across that way.
Hi, a couple of quick questions. First, Andy, you mentioned the subsidy that would be needed to bring public transport fares down enough to make them cheaper than private transport and attractive. I get your overall argument, but do you actually have a short-term figure when you say about the election next year, how much it would cost, say, in Manchester to make that affordable? And you also say you work a lot with central government. I wonder, some of your mayoral colleagues have said today that people in the south and the government don't get how bad it is in the north. Do you talk to the ministers and do you think they get it?
So on the first point, I mean, obviously it depends what you want to achieve, doesn't it? In terms of then how much subsidy do you give? But if we were to have, if you like, London level fares across the north, in Greater Manchester per year, I think you'd be looking at around £100 million a year. Now, not necessarily expecting to get that, but that's kind of what you would need, because they've got lower fares than us. We were quite proud. We were the first people to propose a £2 bus cap, a £2 cap on single fares. It was great that Steve did it as well. Tracy's done it as well. It then became a national policy, and that's good. It shows the government recognised the issue, but it's all temporary funding. And I don't have the exact figure. I'm giving you, I think, off the top of my not educated guess, let's say, but it would be around £100 million a year if you wanted to have the same fares in Greater Manchester, the same fare structure as currently exists in London. I think ministers increasingly do get it. If I'm trying to always be fair in this role and not make sort of cheap point scoring sort of interventions. Yeah, I try to call it as it is. I don't think they did in 2018 under a previous Secretary of State, Mr. Grayling, but I think since then, partly because of Transport for the North, because we speak with one voice through this organisation, and because it's cross-geography, cross-party, it has to be heard, as I've said this before on the podcast, it has to be heard. If we can manage to speak with one voice, all parties, Whitehall has to hear us and respond. I don't think they fully get it, but I think they're getting there is what I would say. But that says what we're doing in the north is increasingly working. There's just no way, if you go back 5 years ago, that this conference would have been on the headlines in the Today programme, but it was this morning. And that is definitely a sign of progress. It's not just ministers. I don't think the London media world ever fully understood what was going on with transport in the north. I think they do now. And they are covering it in a way they've never covered it before. That is progress. But what we want it now is to lead to change in terms of the cost of public transport, the infrastructure that we've got, the ability to integrate it like London has done.
Thanks, Andy. I'm going to move on to the next question. You've got the mic.
Hi. This question is for anyone on the panel, actually. We've talked a lot today about infrastructure, the change that's required, the funding that's required. But I'm interested to know, what role do you think community transport plays in complementing public transport, in making sure that it's great talking about, all these rail services and these plans, but we know that, with a population of 18% disabled people, which is 22% in the north, how are we making sure that it's truly accessible? And have we considered, like I say, the role of community transport in meeting that need and properly funding it?
Yes, I think that's a really good, solid point, and I think that for me, and it goes back to the earlier question, really, it's very easy to focus on cost. What do these things cost? But there's the other half of the equation. What are the benefits that these things bring? Take the point there about community transport. Well, for many, rural or disadvantaged areas, or there are very few alternatives. And so to make those individuals, as productive and to be able to travel around in the way that they wish to do so, then there are very few alternatives. So looking at, be it community transport or be it local bus services or whatever it is, we need to look at this through the prism of, yes, there's a cost, but what are the benefits? And for me, that's where we need to speak more confidently and perhaps a little bit louder in terms of what, these things are going to cost us, but this is the benefits that it's going to bring. And I think certainly community transport sits in that category.
I agree with that. We've got a ring and ride service, which is really important to a number of our residents. So, and we could probably do more in the space of community transport. But I was just coming back to you to make an argument in favour of what we're doing with regard to regulation of buses, because at the moment, people can't be sure what's going to pull up at the curb, because it's, it's true across the north, isn't it? The buses vary, the levels of accessibility vary. What you've got to get to is that system where people know for certain there's a wheelchair space on the bus, that there's street level access, that there's audio visual display and, next stop announcements. That's when I think, you want good community transport, absolutely, but you also need a public transport system that is the most accessible that you can make it. Our Metrolink has very high standards of disability access. If we've got the same across the bus network, I think that also then is hugely life-changing for people with disabilities.
I don't want to be negative because we said we're being positive, but just slightly controversially, maybe I would be more in thinking about. I'd love to see us thinking a bit more about bang for your buck. So these things are really expensive, and coming at it from a rail perspective, Victorian network in places, or if you're lucky, it might be 1960s. Let's just be honest, it costs a lot to make things completely accessible. So let's think a bit more creatively about what's the best solution for individuals who need, enhanced access or different access, who have different needs, and think about trying to make it work for them rather than trying to change the whole thing, to fit it for everyone, because maybe we haven't got a blank checkbook, or maybe we haven't got an endless amount of time.
Hang on a second, Jane. This is the Equality Act.
No, but that's the utopia. Let's get there eventually. But in the meantime,
we're going to get a bit of a sort of challenging note in here. But it's frankly unacceptable and indefensible that so many rail stations in this country are inaccessible to disabled people. It's utterly shocking, to be honest, in 2023, that a large number of our fellow citizens cannot use their local train station. And it's a source of national shame, and it needs to be a higher priority in the rail industry. It really does.
And I don't disagree with that, Andy, but in the meantime, those people can't travel at all, maybe, because we're waiting for them to fit a lift at Marsden, or, whatever it might be, which is going to take a lot of money and a lot of time. So in the meantime, focus on community transport to bring them onto the railway, and it'll make the case stronger, I think, because then we'll have them using the network more, having them see what the network's capable of, and then that makes the case stronger, I think, not weaker, for further investment over time. Nick, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I'll just add a couple of thoughts on accessibility. So firstly, this chimes a little bit to the long-term funding point, I think, about having a long-term vision for where we want to get all our stations and trains and so on. So we've been doing some great work on accessibility for scooters, for instance. So we have now got a version of the Northern network which is accessibility. It was accessible to scooter users, which I think we were some of the leading edge stuff on that. So I think I'm with you, Andy. We've got to have that vision for where we get to, so that accessibility is there for all of us.
It's good to hear, Nick. But I think it needs to be quicker. And the one thing I would just say is, we did have a bid in for the devolution of rail stations going back a number of years ago. The industry did resist it. And I don't think that's acceptable for them to do that when they're then not making improvements to them themselves, because our vision would be, these are assets that are place-based assets. We would use them more for regeneration. We'd build more around them, on them, and then we'd be able to do the disability access from the planning game. And I just kind of see this issue not being prioritised within the rail industry, and it needs to. It's not acceptable in this day and age that thousands and millions of people cannot use the rail system. And if you take guards off trains, that'll be a further step back for these issues need to be a higher priority in the rail industry.
Okay, let's take a question from this side. Yes, back. Sorry, yes, you. The mic's just behind you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Martin Higgins and I'm from York. The discussion among the panel just now has concentrated very much on the supply of public transport and how we could change how it's supplied. I think we need to go further than that. We need to talk about the places people are coming from and the places they've got to get to. They must be planned as much as is humanly possible to make sure they are accessible, so we don't put new housing developments in places where they can't be served by public transport, or design the estates in such a way that public transport can't use them. And similarly for facilities, sports centres, shopping centres, education facilities, they must in the future be provided in a way that is suitable for public transport, so that however bad the situation's got now, at least that aspect of it is being controlled and improved. Thank you.
About the long-term vision. Anybody want to come in on that one?
It's a big question. It's an awfully big question, that one, really. And I think goes beyond transport. I mean, there's some really fundamental planning issues that are raised there. Certainly, one of the things that we TFN are doing is we've developed some modelling tools to look, or developing them to look at accessibility of different locations across the north, so that we're trying to be able to get to a point where we can advise local authorities in terms of the ranking of different sites for different land use types. It's a relatively small step, but it's an awfully big question that you ask there.
It is a big question, but I feel like your average person on the street expects everybody to work together. They want solutions to these, don't they?
I mean, the answer is to start building for public transport first, isn't it? And remodelling some of our towns, replacing some of the retail space that's not needed with more residential space, building flats for younger and older people that are connected to public transport. The truth is we're doing the opposite in the north at the moment still. We're still building for the car because the property industry it's easier to take a greenfield somewhere, isn't it? And convert that into housing, but it isn't necessarily the right solution. I think we do need to start building for public transport. And Hans Mundry had it right, actually. If you had long-term capital settlement, councils would be able to put the public transport infrastructure connectivity in when they're looking at planning developments. But it's the inability to do that often leads to a short-term approach.
Next question. The gentleman at the front there, please. The mic's on its way. Thank you.
Thank you. Colin of High Speed UK. Andy Burnham's talked very correctly about some got to get better infrastructure and having the right railway in the north of England. The problem is that the transport for the Northern Powerhouse Rail, call it what you want these days, is not the right railway because it's been designed to the wrong specification. It's part of the Integrated Rail Plan. The Integrated Rail Plan took as its given HS2 rather than actually meeting the journey time specifications that were set originally by Transport for the North and One North back in 2015. The consequence of this all is now we have a transport network proposal for Northern Powerhouse Rail that fails every single one of its intercity journey time targets because it's not working to the right priorities. Now, why is an intercity journey time target correct? It's because it forced the North to contemplate building new railways, putting new tracks on all of its key intercity routes to deliver the capacity requirements that we need, which will then deliver the network that will deliver both the levelling up and the net zero. If we just go around upgrading our existing railways in a piecemeal fashion, as Andy Burnham said to the Transport Select Committee only last year, if you build a transport network that is only based upon upgrades, you will never deliver levelling up
You
or
can't be
net
quoting
zero.
him when he's sat there. Let him quote himself.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Do you want to come back on that Darren?
Difficult one, really. That for me, I would say. I think there's an awful lot of issues there, around the politics of where we are as a nation, and in terms of what's happened over recent years. I think that from a TFN perspective, we are extremely committed to do the very best for rail across the north. Working with whichever partners that we find ourselves working with over the coming months and years. The importance of an effective rail system is, I think we can all see that that is absolutely, paramount for us. But it's not for me to sit here today to say what that should be. We have to work with, in the context in which things are set.
So we end up with a terminal station in Manchester which doesn't work, and that's what the current status quo has left us with.
Well, so I was going to agree with Colin and say that, if we're told we can't have everything, if that's what the government are saying, that you can't have it all, it'd be better to me to do a small bit right rather than a lot of suboptimal. I think is what Colin's saying. That the design in the integrated rail plan with those two half lines, one going to Warrington, one going to Marsden, does not work. If nothing, to be honest, it makes central Manchester a bit of a concrete jungle because it's all of this infrastructure on stilts above the city. It's just not the right solution. And so I would say, if you can't have it all and it's kind of north-south or east-west, I'd say, well, do east-west properly then. If we're going to be forced into those type of choices, I think the majority of people in the north of England would say that, wouldn't they? I think the worst of it all is do it all a bit badly. I just think that's the wrong way to go.
Okay. Yeah. Is there any questions at the back? I'm aware I'm a bit blinded. Right on the back row waving. Sorry, I'm just trying to keep you fit. You'll have a lot of steps today. Yeah, right at the back. Thank you.
Thanks. We've heard a good deal today about levelling up northern cities, Manchester and northeast, which is great. But has anyone got any proposals for reopening the 8 mile, I think it is, Colne to Skipton line to level up East Lancashire, which is one of the most deprived parts of the country, and also in the region, the part of the region I'm from, Cumbria, towns like Keswick and Cockermouth have been deprived of their railways since the 1970s and 1960s, and yet the Lake District is the most visited area of the country for tourism outside London. Any thoughts from the panel, please?
Any thoughts?
I'll give a quick thought. I won't comment specifically on Skipton Cole. Somebody else on the panel might want to reflect on that. The Restoring Your Railway Fund, I think, has been a great thing. Of course, the Northumberland line today, talk about that in terms of reopening and so on, and the opportunity there. And the economic benefit, I find that really interesting when you look at some of these schemes, the economic benefit that sits on the back of them. So really, really positive case for the Northumberland line. Which is really exciting, I think, for the network. Skipton Cole, I might look to somebody else to pick that specific example.
Yeah, what I would just say on Skipton Cole is I'm not familiar with all the details of that. Certainly, TFN as an organisation has been having meetings. I know over recent weeks, on that. So it's not something that we might sort of be at the very top of our agenda, but certainly, matters like that railway line are ones that we engage with partners on a very regular basis. To make this simple point, it's not about, if we can only have east, west or north, south. We're here to champion, all of the key transport systems for the north. And for me, it's not a binary thing. If you can either have this or you can have that. It's about actually making the case as to why that investment in transport systems across the north, be whatever they are, if we feel that they're the ones that are needed, I say we in a collective sense, then we have to make that case in a more confident, positive way.
Andrew?
For me, this is a good example of thinking more about how we can be more agile. So, huge fan of the Northumberland line reopening for obvious reasons. It's absolutely where I'm from. But why on earth has it taken us so long? And why on earth has it cost so much? And I suspect Colne Skipton is suffering from a similar kind of thing where you go, for goodness sake, it's only 8 mile. Surely we should be able to, just do this quickly. But for whatever reason, we can't as an industry. And certainly not in heavy rail. So I think, and what I was trying to say before about the accessibility question, but perhaps didn't say it quite as effectively as I wanted to, is let's think about what you've just said, Darren, transport solutions. What is the right solution for that community or that group of users? Maybe it's not heavy rail. Maybe it's light rail. Transport for Greater Manchester have done a load of good work on tram, train and those kind of things, and that's developing. That's an example. I'm not saying tram, train everywhere, but think more broadly than what you think the easy answer is. So, the starting point is heavy rail because that's what used to be there. maybe that's not the right answer anymore for the users of that service or the potential users of that service. So maybe, I don't know, controversially for a rail girl to say, maybe a bus is better, because maybe actually on that route, a bus would be better, a really good bus that might actually look a bit more like a coach, but offer people a luxury version of a bus because people think a bus isn't good enough. I don't know. Let's think a bit more, broadly than just, we used to have a train there, why haven't we got a train there anymore? Because that's a bit limited, isn't it?
You'd have to turn up on time, though.
It would.
It'd be
And
affordable.
but that's a fundamental issue, isn't it? It doesn't matter whether it's a bus or a train. It needs to be on time.
One more question, I'm afraid, before we've run out of time. The gentleman at the back there. Thank you. It is, we can hear you.
My name's Kevin Swift and I'm from Wakefield. And it's a question really about how Rail North operates. If anyone has a look at the upcoming May timetable, they'll find that far from service being restored, they'll find there's been a sudden disappearance of any trains between Wakefield and Huddersfield. And that's come about not because somebody's decided it doesn't really fit that way or we should do it differently. It's come about because of a complete failure of coordination between TPE, Northern and Network Rail. And somewhere in the middle of that is Rail North. And it's a question about how Rail North actually tackles its job of coordinating the different elements of our fragmented train system. Thank you.
Anybody want to respond?
Well, I'm on Rail North Committee, so I suppose I should probably answer that. I don't know the details about the specifics, so I'm going to have to sort of apologise for that. But if I look back at the December timetable of last year, there was a long debate through Rail North about, there was various iterations, were there not, Nick, where we were saying, no, from my side of things, Wigan got particularly badly hit, parts of Stockport, and I think Sheffield had lots of concerns about their connectivity, or they still do actually, to Manchester Airport. And what we did was we worked with the train operators on various iterations and got it better than it was. Let's put it that way. But obviously, from your perspective, it sounds like something quite serious was missed there. I guess it's a complicated situation because you've got Rail North and then you've got the department, so it's a quite confusing landscape. But the Rail North Committee and Anna Jane maybe might bear me out on this. We had a lot of challenging conversations through the timetable chaos, but it actually brought some order to the chaos when we got really focused and into the detail. So I think it's got a real role, to be honest, and I would say give it more of a role rather than less of a role. And then I think the places of the north that feel they get missed might get heard better. I think if I'm honest, if the industry does it on its own, it often will miss some of the issues that we know are important as elected politicians. So I think don't dismantle it completely. I think it's got something going for it, but could probably be better. And I would hope we would work together. Well, we do work together, Nick, don't we? But we could make those arrangements better still going forward. The key thing I would say, though, is just a really important point to make. This organisation and this conference must not get into a position where we think the December 22 timetable is it. Because that was a much reduced, and is a much reduced timetable, given what we were meant to get in May 18, and we realised that the infrastructure hadn't been built to support that May 18 timetable. That's basically what happened. We must hold out and say to the government, they have got to restore that level of ambition that we had in the May 18 timetable as quickly as possible. And Rail North has been a voice for that and needs to continue to be a voice for that. It's not about just managing a smaller timetable better. We've got to get back to having a much more expanded timetable with many more Sunday services than we've currently got, later night running services, and that's what we should be holding out for. But that requires the infrastructure to be put in, particularly in central Manchester.
Thanks, Andy. Right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to take the privilege of having a very quick question that they haven't been briefed on, so apologies for that. I'm 46, my daughter's 23. When I was 23 years ago, I was struggling on a bus, but it was cheap and they came, and we used to do a lot of travelling around on trains. In 23 years, should we still all be able to walk and be fit and healthy and be sat on here now? What do you genuinely believe will have changed to get the North moving? Because for me, I genuinely believe it could be an attraction of price rather than the cost of it putting people off. So for me, if I had a magic wand and I genuinely want to make change, it would be all about the cost of it. 23 years, if you sat here again, what do you genuinely, hand on heart, believe is a positive thing that we could have achieved? Should we go down that way? I'm Jane. Sorry, that puts you first. It gives you more time to think.
I'm going to fly a flag that I will always fly at any given opportunity. So I would like to see a more diverse railway workforce, and I would say that because I'm involved in things like Women in Rail, and I'm the only.
Do you think we can
female on the
achieve it
panel.
though? You've got to believe it.
Well, I've got to believe that in 23 years we're going to be in a much better place. You know, I wish we were in a better place now, but give me 23 years, it'll look a lot better. And I agree with you. I think cost is probably the most important thing to genuine users of transport. So I think sometimes as professionals, take a little step back and think, you know, we know a lot about transport systems because that's what we do. So sometimes we might think the priority is something that it isn't, but I think cost for your everyday punter is genuinely the most important thing for most of us in regards to anything in our lives, isn't it? So I would like it to be better value for money, which doesn't necessarily mean it's cheaper. It just means that the users of transport solutions think it's better value for money.
Darren, what can we genuinely achieve?
So for me, the last 23 years has been massive change. But I think the really important point is that change, that speed of change is increasing. It's ever increasing. You know, if you look back to what our lives were 23 years ago, we couldn't have envisaged what it is like today with, you know, the phones and like we have in our pockets. For me, technology will take us to places that we just can't even imagine. I think even sat here today, I think there'll be some new technologies in terms of, we talk about bus, tram, maybe things like trolleybus and the like, might make a re-emergence because, moving away from petrol diesel vehicles, I think that in 23 years time, cracky, that's, we can't imagine that's still going to be there. So electrification of mass transit systems, that will happen, that needs to happen. And how we integrate, how people travel and how they pay for that, will be certainly, I believe, needs to be transformational. And I would also like to imagine that we can move more to the Germany type model where we as a society can see the real benefits of this. So some people might still have, a car of some sort in the garage, but choose not to use that for 90% of the time.
Definitely doable if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
Nick?
So I want to say a decarbonised railway. I really want to say a decarbonised railway. I don't know if I could put my hand on my heart and say that will definitely be delivered in 23 years' time. We need to, but there's a long way to go for North. The one that I think will be, and we've really let ourselves down if we don't, links the technology and the fares point. If we haven't simplified fares and made that simple, trusted fares piece. I mean, London, you just go and tap, don't you? Tap on, tap off. And you trust. The big difference is you trust that the transport authority behind that works out your fare, and that is such an enabler to travel. And we have to be here. I mean, that's got to be a lot less than 23 years. I hope I haven't pinched yours there, Andy.
No,
but we've got to do that.
You've given me a good. I'll be in my 8th mayoral term by then, and I'll be some good material for it. No, I would say something similar. I think the whole of the north of England will have German-style integrated intra-city public transport by that time, zero carbon at street level. We will have it within a decade for certain, but I think it will go everywhere, and I think the north of England will be an even better place to live by that point. I hope it's as cheap as we all want it to be. It should just be the natural choice for people. I think the generation growing up now don't want to own a car. Maybe that was your daughters. You didn't want to.
That's right. Yeah.
But I think by that point, people really won't have to. But I don't think we'll have cracked the cross. I hate to say it, and I wish I could be more positive at the end. But I don't think we'll have solved the cross northern issues by then, because I can't see enough pace and focus on that at this moment in time. Will it take less than the 2 hours 40 something minutes it took me to get from my side of the country to here in 2046? I hope so. It probably will be quicker, but will it be quick enough? Probably not, unless we change the future. And that's what TfN, I think, is doing. Actually, it is beginning to get a grip on northern transport issues in a way that we've never seen in our lifetime. So there is hope, isn't there? There is hope. Let's keep fighting for it because, you know, I think when we fight as One North, we win as One North, and let's keep doing more of that together.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you here in 2046. Please give a round of applause to our wonderful panel.